The BPSU Tizard Bursary offers paediatric trainees and those early in their consultant careers the opportunity to undertake a national UK-wide surveillance study. It is a wonderful opportunity and a start to many an academic career. The intention of this webinar is to give potential applicants an overview of the process and guidance on how to apply, with links to more detailed advice on the BPSU website. The BPSU is financially supported with grants from Public Health England, University College London, Great Ormond Street Hospital Children's Charity and the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. It was formed in 1986 and the Tizard Bursary started in 2003 in recognition of Sir Peter Tizard. The unique element of BPSU surveillance is the monthly Orange reporting card, which goes to every paediatrician in the UK, who can then report whether they have seen a child with one of the conditions on the card. Following reporting, the paediatrician receives a questionnaire which they can complete from information normally found in routine clinical records. The Orange card has recently been replaced with an Orange email for electronic reporting. There have been over 100 successful BPSU surveillance studies, and the surveillance method has been replicated around the world. Ultimately, the purpose of the BPSU is to provide better care for children and their families with rare conditions. The BPSU achieves its purpose by advancing knowledge about rare health-related events occurring in childhood, particularly understanding how rare conditions present, how they are managed, and their short-term prognosis. New knowledge is then disseminated through publications, presentations, and digital media. Like all good research, surveillance starts with an interesting question. The challenge is then to find the best research method to answer that question. Refining the questions requires multiple perspectives and hence the importance of stakeholder engagement, including public and patient involvement. Often one of the most challenging elements of a surveillance study is to refine the definition used for both the surveillance and analysis. Relatively straightforward for Down syndrome, but far more challenging for a diagnosis of, say, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. The next challenge is to define achievable objectives translated into measurable outcomes that will have been documented in the clinical records. Again, easy for deaths, but far more challenging for quality of life. For the Tizard Bursary application, it is essential that the applicant has sufficient time to devote to the study and the necessary support from both a more experienced BPSU applicant and administrative support to handle the questionnaires. The intention is to address a question of clinical and/or public health importance for the benefit of affected children and their families. Most studies include an estimate of either incidence or prevalence, presenting features, clinical management, and short-term follow-up. The intention is for bursary applicants to be early in their academic careers, which translates to all trainees or being within 3 years of appointment of their first consultant post. They should also not be previous Tizard Bursary winners or have previously submitted an application on the same research topic to the BPSU. It is acceptable to jointly and job share the BPSU Tizard Bursary. As with all research, deciding and refining the question is the most critical element of a successful Tizard Bursary application. Ideally, it is a topic that you've been thinking about for a while or are passionate about that has arisen from clinical practice, which could then benefit affected children. For example, this could include anything from a rare cause of microcephaly through to the circumstances of a near-drowning event, through to a rare drug reaction, or an unusual complication of a common condition, or an abnormal laboratory result. The permutations are endless, but the topic must meet study criteria. Now to outcomes. There is often confusion between the concepts and measurement of needs, outcomes, function, and the burden of disease, whether to families, the NHS, or wider society. The majority of BPSU studies either ask about intermediate outcomes or longer term outcomes over either 1 or 2 years. It is vitally important to be clear how outcomes will be defined and measured. Whatever is chosen should be routinely available from clinical records. The bursary application form will ask you how your study will contribute to the evidence base for the condition under study in terms of scientific knowledge, public health and/or service benefit, clinical practice and clinical outcomes. These headings are an aide-memoire and do not all require completion. From a purely practical standpoint, BPSU studies are generally limited to a maximum of about 300 cases, generally collected over a period of 13 months. Where the condition is extremely rare, the surveillance definition may have to run over 2 years in order to define a cohort of sufficient number to be worth studying. The surveillance definition must be clear and understandable to the majority of paediatricians reporting cases and may have both inclusion and exclusion criteria. The analytic case definition is then used to select cases to be included in the study from those initially reported from the surveillance definition. It is essential that the analytic definition is unambiguous, and where there is uncertainty, an expert group may be convened and a collective decision can inform case inclusion in the study. The application asks about expected numbers, which should be answered from the most reliable sources available, but may sometimes be a best estimate. Generally, BPSU studies cannot study the impact of an intervention because there is no control group. However, comparison between different management strategies or an audit against management protocols is possible. Prevalence studies are possible, but are only successful if paediatricians are seeing the vast majority of children annually with a particular condition throughout the life of the child. Otherwise, children with presumably good outcomes who are discharged from follow-up will not be reported. Retrospective reporting is not encouraged due to problems with recall bias. Because of the anonymity of reporting, BPSU studies cannot be used to populate condition registers. However, the reporting clinicians can be contacted with the suggestion that enrolment in a register may be of some benefit to the family. Patient and public involvement. Attention to PPI keeps the research centered on the benefits for patients, whether directly or indirectly, in both the short and long term. This patient-centeredness helps keep all stakeholder interests aligned. It has value in itself and improves research outcomes, creates new hypotheses, better guidelines, and more relevant public health policy. There is no single right way to achieve PPI, as it will vary widely with the condition being researched. Ideally, the research protocol is co-produced with patient groups. Often a good starting point is talking to the BPSU PPI representatives who have a wealth of experience in this area, and then the relevant patient support organisations. The lay summary of your research should not contain medical jargon and should be written in plain English and no more than 300 words. The intention is that an application for a Tizard Bursary and successful completion of the BPSU study will actively contribute to a paediatrician's academic career. To help with the application process, a range of guidance is available on the BPSU website, including basic epidemiology for BPSU studies, study follow-up, assessment measures, and PPI guidance. Like all examinations, it's important to complete all of the questions. Tizard Bursary applications are judged on 3 sets of criteria: the applicant, the study proposal, and then supervision and support. Ideally, the applicant should demonstrate that they are research interested by demonstrating their involvement in research and audit to date, and that they will have the necessary time to take on a BPSU study over the next 2 years. The application is also asked what academic training opportunities are available to advance their career during the period of the BPSU bursary. The application should also include evidence of engagement with relevant stakeholders, particularly patient support groups. The range of BPSU studies is enormous, from rare disease to rare complications to rare events. A full list of all BPSU studies is available on the BPSU website, and just a few of the successful Tizard Bursary studies are included in the box above. The successful applicant will have access to the BPSU office resources in order to submit their application for ethics approval. They will also have access to an allocated BPSU advisor, a stipend to cover course fees, paid attendance to the RCPCH annual scientific meeting, and an invitation to sit as an observer on the BPSU scientific committee for a year. So in summary, the Tizard Bursary is a wonderful start to an academic career. The BPSU Scientific Committee is very supportive of applicants, and on completion you will have contributed to the paediatric evidence base and become an expert in your subject area. While there is only one winner a year, many of the other applicants become successful BPSU researchers when they find sources for funding for their particular interest. This quote from an early Tizard Bursary winner sums it up very well. It gave me an introduction to research, the support to formulate my question, and develop my ideas. It was a building block for a career-long interest in research. Good luck with your application. Here are just some of the resources available on the BPSU website.